Welcome back, everybody. Another Monday, another Porsche Masters Cup round 5 at Silverstone. Welcome to Racing Club International. My name is George Smith, and of course, for the last couple of weeks, we have been bringing you all of this Porsche Cup action. Well, it's not even Porsche Cup, it's just Porsches, to be honest. Porsche Cup cars, GT4s and GT3s, all on the same circuit at the same time, hence the name, the Masters Cup. And joining me in the box once again, the devilish pair it's Joshua Devonshire. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back, and has it been a week already, George? It's been feels like it's been more than it feels like it hasn't been more than just a couple of days since we were in Japan. So yeah, no, Silverstone, amazing circuit if I do say so myself, and usually plays host to some really good racing, and I think we're going to see that tonight.
We are indeed. We look at the track here at the end of practice. I was told and promised by the weatherman that, of course, we would see some rain, but practice looking like it's drying up. We saw the rain coming down at the start of practice, but it's dried up here. I really am holding thumbs that we do see a little bit of a downpour, whether it's in quali or in the rain. Ooh, I think we're in for a treat, actually. I think we are going to get a nice and wet quali session, and I honestly hope that it follows through into the racing conditions as well.
Absolutely, it's going to change the order up a fair bit, and if it's anything like what we had with the British GT Championship last season, we had a race at Silverstone, and that was changeable conditions, and that played into strategy and made the race quite interesting. So we should be able to see something like that tonight as well. Obviously, track limits already, like Suzuka actually, track limits a big thing around Silverstone, especially on the exits of Copse and Stowe, and in some cases Abbey as well. And in the wet, that just makes it even more difficult. So we'll see how things get on.
It is good to be out here at Silverstone, and I guess it's kind of traditional for the rain to come down here. So I really am hoping that that's what we get to see. And of course, if you are new here, you are joining us on this Monday for the first time, you've obviously got a bit of a longer qualifying session that we're used to running at Racing Club International, and that of course allows us to run a quali session for all of the car classes, starting out with the GT4s. That's who will be out now. They've got a 10-minute slot. Then the Cup cars come in, they've got a 10-minute slot, and then we wrap things up with the GT3s. And Stefan van Aken currently leading in the AM class in the GT4s, doing a nice big slide there on the cameras, and kind of just goes to show how wet it is. Track conditions wet, with the weather predictions saying that it's going to get more intensely wet as the time runs on. So by the end of quali, the GT3s will be coming out in even damper conditions.
Absolutely, and that's going to make things very interesting. Obviously, more power, a lot more of a handful to actually control in these conditions, and obviously they've seen some massive puddles building up already. So it's going to be good to see exactly what is happening, what goes on for the quicker classes. But right now it's the GT4s, and they are, fairly slidey in their own sense. So they require a lot of on the mechanical grips outside, and there's not a whole lot of that available at the moment.
There really is not. So rounding out their first warm-up lap, and of course having just come out of the pits, they will now be making their way to the timing line. This will be the first time lap that we see from the 420. I like the team name coming up, the team binning it, maybe not wanting that to go down in the wet, but we go on board for that time lap. The first right-hander of Copse. Difficult corner to manage in the dry, and like you said, with the puddles starting to form up, going to certainly be an interesting way to see if this transpires into the race. Then he makes his way in through the likes of Maggots and Beckett's. And again, lots of tight, tricky corners here at Silverstone. You've got some nice straightaways as well, but it's kind of balanced out with these nice medium speed. Mess it up and you ruin your run down to the straights and onto the hanger straight. Now we still stay on board with the number 420. Got to be careful at the end of this braking zone. A little bump in the road as well can just sort of upset the car. Look for the inside apex for the right-hander of Stone, or Van Aken running very deep there, and for them that is not what they would have wanted, because this will be the first time lap. And of course the Vale chicane Again, not a lot of place to make errors here. You've got that big anti-cut curb on the inside before you enter. And you've got to make sure that you carry your momentum around, especially through the right-hander of club. And then onto the back stretch. I believe this has now been renamed the Hamilton Straits. That was done at the end of 2020, obviously paying tribute out to Lewis Hamilton. In the right-hander of Abbey, and he makes his way through the left-hander of Farm. And then this complex of corners is probably one of my favorite. You know, you're carrying quite a lot of speed. Go break down the right-hander for Village as you enter into the loop. And then the exit of Aintree. Again, you just got to make sure you maximize everything that you've got. And make sure that you get a good run down the Wellington Straits. And in these conditions, wellies would be a must. As you can see, lots of puddles forming up before coming down to the braking zone for Brooklands. This left-hander again can catch people off guard. Nice place to make overtakes in race conditions, but in quali, that's not really what you're worried about. Then the big hairpin of Laffield, and that then opens itself up to the final corner, which is hardly really a corner, a little bit of a bend of Woodcote. And then that will be the first timed lap coming out, and you can see the conditions are wild. The windscreen wipers are going for Naken over the line, but unfortunately, having invalidated that first lap, is going to have to go out and set another lap. Gleeson, he's currently sitting in second in that AM class, going to set his first time. And for Naken and Gleeson, of course, fighting it out in their championship. Only, I think it's about 2 points between them.
Absolutely, it's really tight in all the championships from how it's been, and the GT3 championship especially just kind of shifting up constantly. But yeah, it's amazing. Obviously, qualifying, you want to get as good a start as possible, because as I think I said last week, the race starts with quali. Getting a good result starts with getting your car ahead and putting yourself in the best position to actually take the win or the podium or whatever position that you need to get to score the most points. And that'll be on the mind of all the drivers today. Just trying to put in as good a lap as they can and just try to conserve as much time as well. It's very slippy out there at the moment, as we saw with Gleeson invalidating their time, and that means that they lost that lap and therefore have to go making that up again. No, that was Van Aken in the 420 we saw go wide, sorry, and let me just correct myself. And it seems to be a few more drivers have got times on the board, but Boardman is still in provisional pole, so can any of them, by 1.5 seconds as well, so a fair margin. So can any of the other drivers respond to that?
Andy Boardman just having a really good championship overall, as far as I remember. 3 wins under the belt, leading out in the pro class for the GT4s. Had a bit of an unrivaled victory coming out last week in Japan. And looking to show some flames out here in the very wet conditions. Big shout out to everybody watching out in the YouTube chat. Good to have you guys along with us. And of course, as you can see, Racing Club International in partnership with Race Department, AK Informatica, Raceface Speed Labs, and Sim Racing GP. We've got Ryan Rai Gills behind all the cameras this week, which is always a treat for us. And I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys can do. Jacobson looking to improve their time, but you can see just in the wet, I mean, those lap time differences are certainly out to throw a spanner in the works. You really do just want to try and get a good banker lap coming in and then try and attack it after that. But with those lap times being in the 220s, there's not a lot of time, considering you've only got 10 minutes per split to try and get a lap in. Of course, the GT3s will go a little bit quicker, or the Cup cars will go quicker, and then the GT3 is a little bit quicker than them. But overall, the GT4s will be the slowest of our classes. And, I say it each week, but I just applaud all these drivers for showing up and racing, picking up the GT4s, which don't get shown enough love out there. And certainly good to see them coming up. Baranowski over the timing line goes and sets a 2:22.992. Good enough for a provisional third place start, second row of the grid in the GT4 lineup. And certainly looking to chase down Pike, just half a second behind Boardman's time, but all the GT4s, as you can see, making use of the full time here in quali. Nobody jumping back to the pits early, and with 1 minute 22 on the clock, a lot of these drivers are going to be finishing off these laps. Not going to be too much opportunity to try and get another one in there.
No, absolutely, and no, you're absolutely right as well with the GT4s not being shown enough love. These cars can fight so much closer than the other classes. I mean, maybe with the exception of the Cups, but because they're not so aerodynamically dependent, I got my words out finally, they can just follow door to door for a long period of time, and they can really scrap together, and we've seen that on several occasions this championship so far. And yeah, it's always amazing from our perspective to be able to watch that and bring that to you guys. So looks like Vondra just goes a little bit wide on the exit there. It's onto the curb and loses it just a little, and doesn't seem to have held them back too much though as they head through farm. And can anybody respond to Bobbin? Angie Pike only half a second behind, so closed down the gap quite considerably, but still a fair bit off the pace of the provisional pole sitter. But that is looking like that might turn from provisional to actual.
I mean, when we were just looking at the timing sheet there, I mean, it certainly can just be one corner that messes up your run. A 2:21.054 coming out from Boardman, so that's a stellar lap coming in, considering that lots of these drivers are going to be wrapping up that quali session. Pike just being 1.1 seconds behind then, but the number 69 of Boardman puts some space in, shows the pace in the wet.
No, absolutely. You can see he just shows his talent in situations like this. Big off from Kingston Lee there, straight into the wall on the exit, getting onto the Hamilton straight. Just, you want to be very, very careful of the curbs, and no matter what car you've got in the wet. The curbs very, very slippery, very greasy, and well, that will happen. But no, Boardman actually showing an absolute masterclass, and as he has been pretty much all season. He's just been kind of on his own level, so to speak, in some of these races, and well, we'll have to see what happens in the race.
So Stefan van Aken, the car that we saw go out first in quali, is still going to be able to potentially finish up their lap. And as he makes his way out of club down the back end, you can just see in the background the Cup cars are coming out. They're doing their out laps. So the 420 are trying to get the final lap in. We said it, the 420 and the 742 currently sitting in 8th and 9th in quali. Those are the two drivers that are fighting it out in the AM class for the GT4s. And of course, we know that this is the pro split, but for the GT4 class, we've kind of combined up the different levels of the driver's skills. So it's at least a fuller field. You can see 13 GT4 cars taking to the grid. I think it's the most out of any of the car classes that are pitching up to race tonight. So can Stefan van Aken just get a little bit ahead of Gleason? The two of them had a good scrap out at Suzuka, hoping to take it here. And of course, the weather conditions are going to be a big factor in their race. A lot more grip and assists coming out with the traction control. So for the Cup cars that we saw in the background, he's sort of getting a little bit slidey for them. They've got an incredibly big challenge ahead if it is to continue raining down here. So Van Aken now down to the line is not going to manage to get ahead then, but we will jump to Killian Ryan Meenan in that 231 Sidemax Motorworks Cup car. And I mean, these cars are just a handful. At the best of days in the dry, when everything is perfect and the stars have aligned, they are a lot of fun to drive, but certainly take some skill. And now with those wet conditions, it's going to be quite a tough mission getting them around in one piece to start off with, and then also getting a competitive time in. So on the back of the Hangar Straits, we'll see Killian Ryan Meenan finally put the windscreen wiper on, playing life on hard mode, trying to make it a bit more blurry for himself, make the conditions more difficult. The braking zone for the right-hander at the end of the straights. Just try and see, he's trying to avoid all the puddles, trying to just get as much traction as possible, but we'll be feathering that accelerator pedal as much as possible. Can't be too eager to get onto the loud pedal, otherwise you just loop it round, and there goes your banker lap. So Killian doing a good job at the moment, making it look like it's a lot easier than it probably is inside the cockpit. This is why we're commentators and not drivers. We don't have the skills required to drive these cars. And that right hand, Killian picks up a big amount of curb and will send the 231 into the sand trap, retire it back to the pits, and we'll get a race replay here. You'll just see this right hand. I mean, it's precarious at the best of times. There we go. Picks up the curb, and of course, just by the nature of those curbs, the smoother concrete, they don't really disperse water too well. I'm just going to send that on a bit of a spinny spin.
Absolutely. Silverstone's one of those tracks as well, but normally you want to maximize the amount of curb that you get, so you can, especially like Maggots, Baggots and Chapel, for example, you really want to kind of dig into the curb and try to maximize how much of the track that you actually have, but you just can't do that in these conditions, especially in these cars, as you say, without the traction control. And I think he didn't go onto the curb. He just clipped the edge with the tire, and that was enough just to send the car around. And that's going to allow Alexander Guglia to set the first flying lap. So we're going to see what time they come out with. It will be provisional pole, but obviously with the first time, it is the first being set. So that actually is P4. So there are a handful of GT4s that are actually quicker at the moment, and that goes to show just how hard these cars are to drive in these conditions.
I mean, one mistake out there in these cars can put you far down. Cup cars really struggling in these conditions, and we said that it was going to get wetter. You know, that's what was indicated out, and the time that they are out here, it still continues to get wetter. So even if a dry line was starting to form up from what would have been mowed out by the GT4s, the Cup cars now have more rain coming down. Track, of course, can still get flooded, so you know, just from a little indicator, it's not quite at the worst it can be, but certainly trying to make things as difficult as possible for the Cup cars. And for a lot of them, it's going to be about who manages to get a lap in with their allocated, or allotted, should I say, qualifying time period. You can just see Mikael Sandstrom there on the exit, trying to make sure the back end doesn't drift away. Certainly very difficult conditions for these Cup cars.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't envy them in the slightest. Obviously, they're difficult enough to drive at the best of times, and I suppose the loose and sliding nature can be the appeal behind them, but it can also be an Achilles heel as well, given the situations. And Sundstrom getting a little bit loose going through the Vale there, and manages to save it and keep it going. And I'll be thanking the lucky stars for keeping that one on the road and just making the absolute most. Only around 3.5 minutes left of qualifying for the Cup cars, so not a whole lot more. And I think Alexander Guglia is still the only Cup car to have set a time. So we're getting towards the end of the session for these guys.
I mean, we've seen it, Josh. I mean, the GT4s have kind of already struggled with the fact that there's the GT3s and Cup cars on the same circuit as them. You know, they are kind of responsible for just having to hold their line and hope that these guys can make safe passes around them. And they'll certainly be looking at this and thinking to themselves, well, this certainly is not the situation that they want to find themselves in. You know, they're going to be caught up with Cup cars if the conditions continue. So for the drivers in the GT4s, they'll be looking at this timing sheets and scratching at their heads, wondering what the play will be out of the book. So Mikael Sandstrom over the line does manage to get in a time that Guglia, of course, did a 2:15.5. Mikael Sandstrom 1.5 seconds off, so a good 5 seconds clear once they kind of got dialed into the conditions of those GT4s, but certainly still struggling to get them around. And our championship leader, Joe McCauley, yet to set a lap time so far, won't really have too many opportunities after this one to get another lap in. We'll probably get one more after crossing the line here, of course, coming down the Wellington straight now. So 3 corners to go and a minute and 52 on the clock. So certainly should get another lap in. We'll be hoping this is the one that is required. But let's see what Joe McCauley manages to fire in. It's been a bit of a strange session so far for the Cup cars. Seeing them struggle out here, knowing the talented drivers behind the wheel. Certainly going to be an interesting race.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I dare say it feels even a little bit surreal. But Jim McCauley will pull through a full 1.449 seconds clear of Alexander Guglia, putting that Cup car onto provisional pole. And
Gogo Panka also rocking up there with a brilliant time coming in. I mean, 1.2 seconds behind McCauley, but for the 7.78, that's a great performance coming out in these conditions.
No, absolutely. It seems to be that the Cup cars are really finding their stride, and as we see McCauley just losing it a little bit, coming out of Maggots and Beckett and slippy track surface. You see, you just take a little bit of curb. Let's see what happens here. Cuts on the curb on the inside as you kind of want to in the dry, but not quite in the wet, onto the wet grass, and just there's no friction, nothing to slow you down apart from the wall that is waiting. So
I mean, that's a big slam. Can be glad that that sort of happened out in quali, not into a race. Would have been quite costly damage-wise had that been the race. And, you know, we're not weathermen. We don't know what is going to come out in the race conditions. We've been promised rain in the past, and our weatherman got that wrong. So, yeah, it could be a wet quali and go to a dry race. So it's a catch-22. You're probably loading up your wet setups, trying to make sure that you can kind of adapt to all sessions and all that can be thrown at you. Sundstrom has set themselves a decent time as well. So good to see the Cup cars getting themselves up on the timing. Gogo Panka looking good to improve their time here. And I must admit, for the FFS Racing team, I'm a fan of Gogo Panka's paint jobs that he does on these Porsches. You'd probably say that I like any color paint on a Porsche, but certainly like the way that 778 looks in the rain.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the colours I wouldn't have thought that would go very well together by themselves, but when presented in a livery like that, it looks really, really good. So does John McCauley's, actually. John McCauley's livery looks really clean. But, you know, we often see a fair view of these really nice liveries in RCI, and the creativity of the community is always something that astounds me, even when given something quite basic, really. It's just templates and colours to choose from, and you can see just in the distance there, I believe that is the bubblegum coloured car of Heilman. And
the pink elephant racing team.
The pink elephant racing team.
You can recognize it from a mile away. Jordan Fouchot, of course, out on the track there that we saw, currently the leader in the GT3 class, and that means that, of course, the GT3s do get their run now. It almost feels so short, the fact that everybody only gets 10 minutes. Combined, it's a long quali session for us. 30 minutes is not often what we do in sprint type races, but out here, when it's only 10 minutes per car class for a quali session and a long track like Silverstone, the time just flies by. I mean, I can't believe we've only got 8 minutes combined of the session remaining. And for the GT3s, now up to them to show us what they got. They've got the added benefit of having traction control, 2 sets of it as well. I mean, you've got traction control and you've got your cut that you can sort of balance out in the wet. We've seen in the GT4s that sometimes that traction control can be a bane to try and manage out, but Courtney Pride looks like they're going to be the first to try and set a flying lap out here. Warm-up's done and dust. Ooh, that snapback comes back to punish Cody. It's just, I think it's wet Silverstone, to be honest.
No, absolutely. I mean, our very own Ryan Gill once turned around and told me that RCI really stands for rain constantly imminent, and it's certainly living up to its name. And Cody Pride will not be happy about that. They've shown absolutely amazing pace in some of the racing so far, and obviously they are in a good shout to actually take the championship, but they're going to be on a hard charge to maximise the amount of points available to them over the next 2 races. Only 2 rounds remaining, either Silverstone and Spa next week, so he'll be looking to make out as much as he can, and of course Fouchot will be looking to defend as best as he can as well. So it's going to be quite an interesting battle when it all boils down to it, when we actually come to the race. But as I said before, it starts in quali, and on board with Benjamin Heilman, looking to head onto the Hamilton Straight, and looking like they're keeping it really composed, just avoiding the curbs as best they can, and just trying to keep the car composed and away and out of trouble, because you just want to set a banker lap at this point. You're not going for your quickest lap. You're letting the car warm up still, the tyres warm up as best they can, the brakes warm up, which is no easy task in the conditions. And just to try and get the grip to actually go onto an attack run when the time is right in a few laps time. And George, you were saying about the traction control, the traction control system. Is it worth trying to explain what that actually means?
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously got the amount of traction control that gets applied, and that just detects when the wheels are spinning out. And then, of course, you've got the amount of cut that is actually going power-wise to it, the length of time that it is cutting it. So you've got like a balance between just how often it happens, and as well as how much gets cut in that process for whatever length of time. So you've got that ability to try and fine-tune it as much as you can. And we're talking about Benjamin Hellman here. He's going to go and set a pole lap in his class. 5 minutes still to go, so plenty of GT3s to still come out, but a 2:12.468 is going to be good enough to just stay ahead of Jordan for sure from the moment. And I must say, Benjamin Hellman, also known as Stewie to us, he does a lot of broadcasting, does a lot of the back-end development work here at Racing Club International. He's my dark horse. He's silently who I've been rooting for in the GT3s to show us what he's got. Not often that you get to see him racing out, and I've been sort of rooting for him ever since Kyalami. I think that's where I saw his pure pace coming out. He just had a great run coming into quali. The actual race didn't work out well for him, but he had a good race coming out at Suzuka. And personally for me, good to see Elman just managing to hang with the best of them out there. Of course, the pro split, not an easy split to be driving in, and I think he's done a good bit of justice out to his entry, and he still stays in pole position. So in these conditions, slow is fast, and consistency will be more king than ever. We always say that that's what wins championships right at the end of the day, but in quali here it seems to be even more pertinent and more important.
Oh, absolutely. And you were saying about Hellman running with the best of them, almost half a second ahead of Fouchard, and bear in mind that Fouchard's also the championship leader as well, so you're absolutely not incorrect with that statement. You're absolutely correct with that statement, George. He is hanging with the best of them, and still only 3 minutes of the session left to go, and it's a very similar situation as we saw with the Cup cars. Not a whole lot of GT3 cars actually have a time on the board, as we see Olaf Leffer setting a time almost half a second behind Hellman as well. So it seems that the GT3 cars are still struggling. Well, obviously any car's going to struggle, but are still struggling with the traction aids available to them. And I suppose it's a mixture of a balance of trying to not let them interfere too much in slowing you down, and trying to still get the assistance that you need to be able to get around the track safely and quickly. Fouchard crossing the line, are they going to improve on their time? They will not. So that still leaves them in P3 provisionally, as you see Cody Pride coming down into Brooklands now. This is someone with everything to play for. Championship potentially on the line, or definitely on the line I should say. A little bit of a slide coming out of Luffield, heading towards the start finish. One last turn to go. Can they get it right? Of course they will. Flat right-hander, and that will be provisional pole by 1.413 seconds. That's actually fairly significant.
You've got two options out here. You either go for that safer banker lap, like we talked about, try and sort of hedge the fact that maybe other drivers aren't going to be able to get a decent lap in if you just make sure that you minimize the amounts of mistakes that you have. Or you can take Cody Pride's approach and just go all out until you get the lap in that is going to be significantly better. We saw Pride had the pace out at Suzuka, definitely didn't have the right fuel strategy out there. But, coming out to this race, it's a whole new race, it's a whole new strategy level. If the race dries up midway, you got a time when you're going to go on to your dry sets of tires. It might start out dry and start to rain later on. So it's a good sort of a good test here in quali for it to be wet. You get to test out one of your setups at least. and you can kind of make decisions on what you're going to do from there. Olaf Leffer in that 308 coming into the final corner of Woodcote. On the way down to the line, will jump up into P2. A 2:11.994 comes out. 9/10 behind Pride, but certainly managed to recover on what was just the original banker lap.
No, absolutely, and it looks like Saradi in the pits as well, yet to set a time. So are we seeing a potential pit lane start here? Benjamin Hellman still in P3 provisionally. I mean, some 1.413 seconds back from Cody Pride, but we know Cody Pride's pace. They showed it last week at Suzuka until they made a little bit of an error, which caused them to fall back through the field just a little bit. And that's one thing I actually wanted to mention to you, George. Is it possible that we're going to see Cody Pride go for the absolute mother of all charges, but at the risk of potentially making a mistake and potentially sacrificing positions?
Oh, I mean, that's always going to be a question that's going to be on everyone's mind. I think Pride after last week kind of realized that fuel mapping wise, you want to go more for the economy side, try and stay out of the pits as long as possible. What a lap coming in from Benjamin Haleman to 11.496 on the clock. It's just under half a second slower than Pride, but considering where we saw Stewie starting out within the championship, it's just kind of built that composure up and started to just build up that confidence level to be able to drive out here. And certainly a driver that seems to have adapted well to the wet conditions. Alan Knight in that number 970, the Aches and Pains Racing team. I feel like that's how I feel when I wake up in the morning, but probably going to be one of the last cars out here to get a final lap in. The 15 and 24 are going to still be able to get another lap maybe in here, but Alan Knight here currently provisionally on the second row of the grid. It's not a bad part, not a bad place to start. You know, you lead number 1 and 2 into that tricky right-hander to kind of scrap themselves out and see if you can make some space down to the line. Alan Knight now with a bit of a crack over lap, but not going to be good enough to improve. Does improve his own time with 2:12.309 going to be on the clock. Hellman and Pride still able to try and improve their times. Oh, still looking a little bit slidey on that fast right-hander, but the Pink Elephant Racing number 24 trying to see if they can find just that little wedge over the likes of Pride. Pride, like I said, will probably be more focused on strategy coming into this race. We saw at Suzuka that was definitely the determining factor. Ran a much more aggressive fuel preset, had to go in and top up the car, and that just really cost them. But it certainly allowed him to get a lot of pace out on the circuit. Lap time wise, it was just like watching someone fly. So Cody Pride now out through Woodcote on the way down to the line, does improve the 2:10.875. That's a cracker lap coming out from Cody Pride. Pride with a lot of fans in the chat as well. Shout out to all the fans. I believe Grandad Pride is here as well. Shout out to Darren. So nice to see the support coming through. And wrapping up the quali session means that we now have to wait and see what the race conditions are going to be like. If you're in the chat, are you hoping for rain? You're hoping for it to be dry? Let us know.
There's a lot of pride for Cody going on at the moment. Hey, bad jokes for the second week in a row, but but no, it's going to be a bit of a dice roll as to what we actually get weather-wise for the race. So it's going to be as much a surprise to us as it is to you guys. So let's see what we wind up with.
Let's see indeed. And I believe we're going to be able to have a look at our championship standings for you guys in the GT3 class. At the top of that leaderboard, of course, Jordan Fouchot in at the number 11, 222 points. Alexander Shinov sitting in second place in that number 19 on 197 points. Cody Pride holding on to a third place in the championship on 193 points. So that's not too far off, you said it, Josh, to catch up to the likes of Shinov for second. Adam Banfield sitting in fourth place on 185 points. The 308 of Olaf Leffer in fifth place on 169 points. Emil Stancio on 149 points sits in sixth place. Antonio Ceretti in that number 4 on 145 points sits in 7th place. Sebastian Luigi Vita on 132 points in 8th. Benjamin Heilman in 9th place in that number 24, tied on 109 points with the likes of Alan Knight in P10 in that number 970. Sitting in 11th place, Jules Sky on 92 points in the 601. The 666 of Corentin Burgess in P12 on 89 points. Lucas Rommel in the number 23 and 13th with 53. The 124 of Panos Karatis with 44 points sitting in 14th place. Dominic Alvarez in the 105 on 28 points sitting in 15th. And Jack Young still to get on the board, I believe, has signed out of the championship sitting in P16. Looking at the Cup car class, Joe McCauley up at the top on 209 points, just ahead of Mike Noble, who is not racing tonight on 187 points. He sits in 2nd. Mikael Sandström, with consistency being king, making their way up to P3 on 176 points. In P4, the 231 of Killian Ryan Meenan on 172 points, just 2 points ahead of James Parker in that AAA2. I also didn't see in the quali session. He sits on 170 points. Jesperi Helicalio in the 56 sits in 6th place on 158 points. Alexander Guglia in the 898 in 7th on 140 points. Artberg Ertan in the 14 sits in 8th place on 125 points. Gergo Panka on 112 points sits in P9. And Alexander Karsten in that number 22 rounds out the top 10 on 111 points. Just outside that top 10, then in 11th place, Mark Whitford in the 86 on 99 points. Atakan Akar on 69 points sits in P12. Chris Rubelar in 13th in that number 17 on 28 points. And Wojtek Lukaszek on 23 points sits in P14. Looking over to the GT4 class, this is where things get quite interesting. Of course, all these drivers kind of fighting out in their own division splits as well, but overall standings are as follows. Andy Boardman in that number 69, sitting in 1st place with 266 points on the board. Quite a lead over 2nd place of Andrew Pike. That number 57 on 227 points. Nico Charisma in P3 and rounding out the podium sitting spots at the moment with 212 points. As Thomas Baranowski in that number 35 sits in P4 on 197 points. Matthew Kingston Lee in P5 in the 233-718 Cayman on 178 points. Stefan Van Aken in the 420 in 6th place on 154. Joe Gleason in 7th in the 742 with 152 points. Michael Redford on 124 points sits in 8th place. Ty Jolly in 9th place with 99. And then rounding out the top 10 in the GT4s is Michael Jacobson on 92 points. Looking down to the rest of the field in P11 sits Victor Vondra in the number 49 on 88 points. Phil Webb in 12th place with 71 points. Vincent Valentine with 65 points sits in P13. 14th is Zoe Tang with 59 points. Paul Reynolds in the 872 with 51 points in 15th. Michael Duzebek in 16th place, 28 points. And Kyle Heidemann, who has not raced here yet, as far as we remember, sitting in 17th place with 0. So, Joshua, standings wrapped up. Drivers preparing themselves to go. Mike Noble apparently is still in this race. I completely just didn't pay attention to what was going on early on. I just said that he wasn't here. So I, as a Mike Noble fanboy, I think I'll take the fact that I'm probably not going to get signed merch at this point.
Yeah, it's good to see. It's good to see him back racing. No, it's great to see him on the grid, especially with Macaulay in first place as well. Even seeing them side by side. The battles between the battles between two of those drivers are absolutely, they're always immense. They're always great fun to watch and always a bit of a show. So, you're on about predictions. Well, I actually think this race might be Hellman's chance to really kind of show us what he can do in that GT3 class. He's got some good drivers in front of and behind him. And it's going to be a really, really good test to see if he can hold off the likes of Olaf Leffer and Alan Knight, and even Jordan Fouchot. We saw some great defensive driving from Stewie last week at Suzuka, and I think we're going to see the exact same this week. Cody Pride's in a really good position to, I don't want to say run away with it like I do every week, but we know Pride's pace, and I think it's all going to come down to attrition. Can they keep that pace going for the entirety of the race? An hour and 15 minutes. It's a long time to be a maximum attack, and so I'm only going to find out if they can do it. Boardman and Pike, I mean, looking at qualifying times, Boardman has these wet conditions absolutely nailed down, but looking at the weather forecast, the rain is set to lighten within the next half an hour. So, can we see a strategy change? And that might throw any predictions I can make completely out of the window.
I mean, I don't even know that you made a prediction in that. You kind of told me that we were going to choose something, and then you summarized all the drivers, and I don't know if you just picked everyone to win this race at this point. I feel a little bit on the back foot. So who am I allowed to pick now?
I think you owe it to Mike Noble. You know, you questioned his existence today, and I think it might be.
It's like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Looking at all the car classes, I mean, I would like to, I'd like to, like you said, sort of highlight Pride's performance coming out at Suzuka. Obviously, did have a much quicker engine strat going down. Kind of had to go into the pits, which cost them a lot of progress. But you know, you're running on a richer fuel map, and are going to be quicker out on the circuit. I certainly have been building up Howman. I think I've been hoping for him to have a good race for a while in the season, so I'm going to put my money on the number 24, who starts in P2, still on the front row of the grid. And then looking down at the Cup car class, I mean, this is pretty much just a commentator's curse session at this point. If you get picked up here, it's probably not the best place to find yourself as a driver. But Macaulay and Noble, I mean, those two drivers have just had stunning drives between the two of them. I would like to hope that we see them both able to race out to the checkered flag. It's been very difficult to kind of have those battles. We've always seen the top two running close, and something happens to one of the drivers, whether it's an incident on the track or whatnot, and that's kind of taken away a lot of the fun. So I would probably put my eggs into the Mike Noble baskets at this point in the Cup cars, and then looking down at the GT4s. For overall class win in the GT4s, I think I would be mad not to pick anyone but Boardman. Just shown pure class out in the series so far. Probably my safest bet, as most of the people know here, when it comes to me betting and making predictions on races, I probably shouldn't. I lose a lot of money doing it, so hoping this time around I have a better set of predictions. So those are my three predictions for the three classes.
Don't think they're a million miles away from what we can expect to see. So, I mean, Silverstone, anything can happen. That's RCI Silverstone more than anything, so anything can and will happen. So, it looks like we're getting ready to 2x2 formation, and we're getting ready to go.
We are indeed. So, of course, round 5 here of the Porsche Masters Cup taking place at a very wet Silverstone. The race starts wet. It looks like weatherman is predicting it gets drier. Not quite to the conditions where we are going to see the rain cease just yet, but we've got an hour and 15 minutes of racing to go, and that can be anybody's game. But 2x2, they line up out of Woodcote, make their way towards the start-finish line. We see Cody Pride and Hellman leading off the pack, with, of course, Leffer and Knight chasing down on the second row of the grid. Quite a big big gap coming out between Pride and Element for the start here. Green, green, green. The lights are going. We're live for racing. Welcome to round 5. It is wet and wild, and Pride with a start of all starts with the whole shot, managing to get away without any contention. You can see these GT3s doing exactly that between them. I mean, the biggest car class out here is the GT4s, so they're going to be having a wild race themselves, and of course going to be battling up against the likes of these faster car classes who have all the onus on them to make sure that they have the cleanest overtakes when trying to lap the field in the GT4s. But great start coming out from everybody. You can just see that line of Porsches, which is something that I have in my dreams all the time, but a super start considering the wet conditions coming out here.
Absolutely, and lovely little Porsche train that we only really see at the start before the cars start to disperse, as you were saying there, George. And looking at the helicopter shot now of Alexander Googly, you see just how close. Killian Ryan Meenan taking a look at the inside. I don't think he's going to quite make it stick. Panker having a bit of that's a car that's off. That is Joe McCauley. That's our race leader. He's rammed.
Oh, and now Joe McCauley in that number 18, going to have to wait for the entire field to get past. See some GT4s doing a little bit of grass cutting as well. Race replay going to show us what's happened up here. And we'll just see what's happened to Joe. He's taking a little bit too much curve, a little tap round as well, just being assisted out there. And for Joe McCauley in the Cup cars, that's going to be, you can just see some chaos in the background. That's Van Aken in that 420 GT4 that's also made a bit of a mistake at the Vale chicane. So the first 2 corners were hashtag blessed, and thereafter it was knives out. And the number 1 contributing factor to that, probably the rain coming down, especially on cold tires and cold brakes. Here's Stefan Van Aken going 3 wide as they come down into the braking zone. Oh, Van Aken just not aware that there was another car. Whoa, 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 holy, oh, I mean, oh no.
Oh no.
That is I mean, it takes a lot to flip a car in ACC. That certainly was a kickflip that I've not seen too often, but I mean, that's a terrible mistake coming in there. I mean, had the mistake of coming across the track before Vale, not noticing the car is outside, that then sent him straight into the apex, where of course the rest of the field was at. So that is a big mistake. I mean, we sort of make light of it here, but that certainly is not the way that we would have wanted to see the race starting out.
No, and for the car that was actually in the corner as well, being completely kind of blindsided from the side, that's got to have been a massive shock. There was no way they could have seen that one coming. That was some Tony Hawk level, some stunts right there.
I mean, we normally say that the GT4s are a little bit less susceptible to damage coming out. You know, they've got less aero in effect. Essentially can almost put their elbows out, have a little bit of rubbing as racing, but that certainly was a big smash coming down. And I mean, I'm not even sure which car he hit at that phase. It was a big collision and certainly going to impact both their races.
So that was was that the 420 that was involved, and I'm not entirely certain. Was it Vincent Valentine's got a fair bit of damage to the side of the car, looking from what I can see, so it might have been them, but without looking it over, it's difficult to see, and our stewards are going to be very busy after that one to try to figure out, because there was a car off on the infield, then the other incident happened, and so much going on all at once.
I mean, just look at the timing sheets. I mean, the fact that Knight is now behind the Cup cars for sure in the same position. Seredi there as well. I mean, that is not a place that you want to be. We know that the Cup cars do have the legs on the straightaways to sort of keep up. Definitely not the same levels of downforce in the corners, but there's no obligation for the Cup cars to have to move out of the way from the GT3s. You know, the GT3s are essentially more responsible here to get through the traffic without causing any mayhem. So when they are caught out behind the battling Cup cars, it's a difficult position to be in. So Alan Knight not in a great pace, Mike Noble on the back end of Googly as they make their way through Mackett's, Beckett's and Chapel. Knight Noble just doing Night Noble things. Just hanging on to the back end, going to sit in the slip down the back of the straightaway and see if there's something to be had coming into the braking zone. Going to have a look on the inside, try and make that entry as small as possible. And the 1, 2, 3 breezing through there, making work of Alexander Guglia as they make their way down into Vale. And no counter attack going to be able to be mounted up from the 898. And now immediately Sundstrom on the back end there trying to get through. You see Alan Knight in that number 970 in the GT3 just caught up amongst the cup cars here, cats amongst the pigeons, and nowhere to really go.
Absolutely, you just sort of see the you see Sundstrom just pulling ahead on the straights even just there as well. So a Knight having to use every little bit of cornering advantage that he has over the cup cars to actually get around. As you see Michael Jacobson making a move on Zoe Tang, going side by side onto the Hamilton straight, and Zoe Tang goes wide onto the infield, and that's going to lead them up to a potential counter attack to Valentine as well. Valentine getting a little bit closer, Jacobson almost running into the back of that pink Cayman.
Zoe Tang just going ultra defensive. That's going to potentially cost them coming into the braking zone here for the right-hander. Both of them going quite deep. You said it before. Valentine looking in the background there in that bright Luma and blue Porsche to see if a double move can be prepared. Zoe Tang trying to get something back here against Michael Jacobson. But just a lot of mixtures of classes here on the circuit. And of course, pack battles are just going to be a thing in these conditions. So you just got to sort of plan it out, see where you can get a move done, and hope to not lose too many positions behind you. But Valentine certainly trying to pounce if that opportunity arises. In the 171 out of the pots and into the fire. It's definitely not the way to say that saying, but now going to be in a struggling position as that 667 makes a charge down, maybe into a look into the right-hander, space given, and 171 of Zoe Tang robbed out of 2 positions in just under half a lap.
Absolutely, and is Philip Webb also going to be in with a chance as well? They seem to be catching up. That gap has closed. Philip Webb having a great view of those battles going on in those overtakes, doing right behind them, and I bet you he's aching to see if he can make it 3 for 3 and try to follow with and get the overtake on Zoe Tang as well. As we see Andrew Pike very close to the back of Boardman. I mean, I think given Boardman's pace, we were expecting to be almost a repeat of last week, even where it wasn't really that close, but Pike not letting that happen this time around, looking on the back wing of the 69 Cayman. And you just sort of see it's waiting. Andrew Pike's Cayman is also waiting. The 57, you see the white against the contrast of the sky, and that'll be filling Boardman's mirrors as he just glances back, and Andrew Pike just there, just waiting for any kind of mistake. He will capitalize on that, and he's also going to try and force that mistake as well, running slightly wider onto the curbs. And it looks like it's drying out a little bit as well, so that's maybe not as deathy as it was in qualifying. But I think we're going to see a fairly strong battle between Boardman and Pike this time around.
I mean, strategy-wise, you then got to be sort of worried about what you got when it comes down to the tires that you're running out. I mean, those wets are pretty effective when it is coming down and it's a wet or damp track. But as soon as it gets any drier than that, you're starting to cook them up and losing grip. So when it does dry up, which it looks like it is, you mentioned it's easing up on the rain, soon to be a little bit less of a downpour, means that strategy is going to come in. But Andrew Pike from OTL Racing certainly not allowing Boardman to get much of a gap. We saw Boardman having a lot of grace given out at Suzuka, and that might even work into the detriment for Boardman, you know, not having the experience out on the circuit, having to continuously defend, but having a little bit more clean air. now going to be occupied a lot more with those mirrors and making sure that those inside lines are not just given away for free. So interesting to see how this one transpires, and Andrew Pike certainly doing a good job to give us that battle we wanted to see.
Absolutely. Track has just gone damp as well, by the way, from wet, so I said definitely drying out, and it's going to be a case of who will switch to dry tyres first and who will make that call most effectively. To see Killian Raimond just getting a little bit loose, coming around the loop there and finishing around through Aintree and just trying to get the run on Guglia, heading down into Brooklands. We've seen some amazing moves here in the past, and I don't think this is going to be the lap that we see a repeat of any of them, but it's going to be one step closer. Killian closing the gap right on the back of Guglia through Luffield, taking a slightly wider line. If they can get the exit right, they can maybe get on the power just a little bit sooner, get the run down into T1, maybe go side by side, and doesn't seem like there's going to be quite enough room to do that. But I think it's only going to be a matter of time. We know Killian very well from previous seasons and this season. He doesn't give up. He's incredibly quick, and his racecraft is pretty amazing at the best of times. So,
side by side through here, there's going to be elbows out for sure. Both of them going to be making mistakes coming through there, and unfortunately, I mean, we're kind of in a difficult position to go side by side through there, wasn't it, Josh?
Absolutely, just wasn't quite enough room. Looks like Guglia kind of turned in. We're not really expecting Killian to be there, and tries to sort of take the line. Killian clips the curb, and then in turn clips Guglia, and then sends them both off. But doesn't say the positions have changed at all, but it has put Killian into the lines of that. Well, that's Saridi, that's the GT3. Did Saridi start from the pit lane? I believe that was the case. So they've done really well making their way through the field.
Oh, Joe Macaulay
side by side with Sundstrom going into the Vale and making the move stick. Obviously, Macaulay having the spin early on in the race. So I think he was helped around by Mike Noble, actually.
Round the outside of Stowe, that's a brave overtaking position, but certainly sets himself up for the inside line coming into Vale. You have a very narrow margin to then make that left-hander. We saw how detrimental it was in those GT4s in the opening lap, but brilliant little overtake coming out there from the Blame Mike Jones car. Hashtag Blame Mike Jones in chats required, because Mike's not here to shout at me, but certainly a good show being put on here.
No, absolutely. And well, we know Macaulay, we know his racecraft and pace, and there's a reason why he's currently leading the Cup Car Championship, and he's not been given it easy. He's having to fight for it. So, you know, it's going to be a bit of a recovery. Oh, I'll say a bit of a recovery drive. It's going to be a heck of a recovery drive to get through today with only about an hour remaining of the race. I said only, again, only 15 minutes gone so far. So, everything to play for, and apparently we're also getting a replay of what happened at the start as well. Here we go. Fouchard, this will be why Fouchard has fallen back. A little tap with Alan Knight, and that sends them just around in T1. Alan Knight able to recover just a little bit, but Fouchard, that's why Fouchard is a little bit further back than they started. It's not what you want to see.
No, it certainly isn't, and for sure, I mean, right at the start there, wasn't able to get back on the track, to regain track positions, had to sort of settle in behind a lot of those Cup cars, and now same sort of position that the likes of the other drivers find themselves caught up in the traffic of the GT3s and some of the GT4s as well, going to start putting some pressure on each other. Just, again, just managing the entire race duration. You mentioned it, only 15 minutes have gone so far, and a long race still to go. Of course, with those evolving track conditions, strategy going to be a key important factor here. When you put, when to change tires over, if it does go dry enough for those slicks to come on, it's going to be important to time that at the right time. You don't want to be caught out here with shoes when you required ice skates and roller skates. It's just not going to be the place that you want to be. So for a lot of these drivers, going to be keeping an eye on those weather conditions. Andrew Pike in those GT4s, still keeping things nice and close to the back end of Boardman. For sure, going to be handed out a 5-second penalty as well then, Joshua.
Absolutely, and apparently we're also going to be seeing exactly what caused that as well, according to the notes given by our amazing broadcaster, and that is Ryan Gill. So,
I mean, that was the incident we saw at the start of the race.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit behind. I apologize. Yeah, it seems like they were just trying to go too wide when there's just not the space for it, and obviously it set Alan Knight back, but it did set Fouchard back even more themselves. So kind of only got themselves to blame for that one, it would seem, or at least the stewards have deemed that. And 5-second time penalty, that'll be served in pits, if I'm correct, right?
It will be. If they do go into the pit box, that will be able to be served out. If there's no pits strategy that comes out, it's just be added on to the end of the race timer. So the stewards, having reviewed that, taken their time, of course, to go through every possible angle. We only get to see one replay angle. They get to see as many as they want multiple times. And I think when they go to bed at night, those kind of things replay in their head over and over and over again. So I don't question the stewards. I value my life, and for them, they found that Fouchard was at fault there, and have indicated, should I say, the fact that he will be given 5-second time penalty to go with it. So a little bit sad then for the Fouchard fans, as of course he tumbled positions and will certainly have what is the lightest of penalties that can be applied through in terms of time. Killian Ryan-Meenan on board with him for a little bit as we switch over to Guglia. This is the battle between the two of them. Guglia, a big snap, and the loop around, we talked about it. You've got to be very careful on the throttle pedal in these cup cars. Here we'll get a nice replay. Killian Ryan-Meenan putting the pressure on. The 898 goes for the inside, maybe a little bit of standing water catching up, and unfortunately just the big snap oversteer moment comes out and sends Alexander Guglia out into the sandpit.
No, absolutely, and it's very easy to get overconfident in these situations. You know, you run a couple of laps and you're running for a while, you get into a rhythm, and it takes the smallest of things to break that rhythm and end up into a bit of a tank snapper, it looks like. It snapped one way, he tried to catch it, and then the weight transfer just kind of snapped him the complete opposite way and into the sand. And I don't know about you, George, but I don't like sand because it's coarse, it's rough, and it's irritating.
I must admit, when I do go to the beach, I try and find somewhere with a bit of grass and somewhere to put my umbrella up so I don't get sunburnt by the sun, and I avoid the sand at all costs. So I feel it's the same sort of analogy to be used out in racing. Weatherman Ryan letting us all know that in 30 minutes it will ease up, the rain will stop, and we'll go to dry conditions. So if our timing is all correct, the last 30 minutes might be in a drying track condition. Doesn't mean to say that it'll go dry and then start raining again in 10 minutes. This is the UK. Every time I try and go and get my shopping done, kind of punished by exactly that. Starts off dry when I leave. By the time I leave with my shopping bags, it's wet. So don't just think that it's going to go dry if it does go dry. Certainly could bucket down again.
No, absolutely. And this is just a prediction as well. The weather forecast we see at the top, I believe, it's just a prediction. It's likely to happen, but we've seen it in the past where it doesn't quite work out that way. So it's going to be interesting to see how the drivers do respond. But I'm imagining it's a fairly reliable way of seeing. It's a fairly reliable way of seeing exactly what the weather should be doing. And it's worth taking its opinion into account. So that's Van Aken with a 15-second time penalty. Is that? So it looks, it's very compressed on my end, but it seems like it will be, and that will be for the absolutely massive incident we saw going into the Vale on lap 1, and that was something. And yeah, let's see, we're watching that back again now, and did he just miss the brake? Right? He taps Fouchard. Taps Fouchard, just goes round, and yes, that was Valentine that was hit. So I did think I saw damage on the side of that GT4 of the 667. And it looks like I was correct in that, but in thinking that as well. You see, Hellman, update on Hellman, by the way, still running in P2. You see them in the distance of Van Aken right now. And Olaf Leffer, who's behind by a good margin, according to our timing sheets here, 6.6 seconds. So Hellman doing really, really well in the conditions, just keeping it consistent, keeping that Porsche out of trouble. In fact, you see Leffer in the background there. I'm looking on a different screen. Leffer not far behind Hellman at all, but Hellman holding them off. Angie Pike and Andy Boardman, though, still at each other. Pike not fallen back at all.
I mean, I must be honest, Van Aken's 15-second time penalty probably doesn't seem that harsh, considering the replay view of it. I mean, it was certainly something spectacular out of high diving, 101. But I suppose the stewards also ruled that after the initial contact came through, was then on the grass, unable to slow down, not really anywhere to go, and a bit of a passenger there. So just allocating out the maximum time penalty that they could, without thinking that they needed to do a stop and go or a drive through for it. So, I mean, I think Van Aken a little bit lucky to get away with the penalty that they received, but I can also kind of understand why it would be given out at that extent. We aren't stewards. They've been able to relook at it, and I'd say it probably has a lot to do with being a bit of a passenger in that scenario. But for the likes of Valentine, who I think the collision was with, that would have been a lot of damage picked up, and we saw lap 4 was where they went into the pit box, so that was probably to do some repairs to that car. It was a big slam. So the number 667, currently sitting in 25th place, probably had to go into the pits to repair their car.
Oh, absolutely, and as you say, the stewards, they have more eyes on this than we do, and they can go back and watch it over from all the different angles, check all the inputs, and they've got experience in making these kinds of decisions, and that is exactly what they do. It's very similar to a situation we saw in Britcar, for those of you guys that were following that, at Snetterton. The GTR just hitting a puddle and not able to slow down in time and running into the back of one of the Bragas, and it seems to be that we saw a very similar situation. As soon as you become a passenger, you're unable to slow the car down, and Andrew Pike going side by side with Andy Boardman, a little bit of a tap on the door. Pike will spin round to lose a little bit of time, but catches it going down the Wellington Straight. And
that was, I mean, Pike just had such a great angle and a run coming into the loop. A little bit ambitious through Aintree. There wasn't a lot of space to come through, but managing to, both of them managing to come out of that somewhat unscathed. I would be scared of what Joshua would consider a big hit if that was just a little tap. I'm very scared of my co-caster at this point.
A lot of people are, George, do not worry. But no, it was an absolutely amazing save from Pike there, and from both cars actually, because Boardman could very easily have been pushed so far wide onto the grass and could have been a lot worse than it was, but Pike does have some time to catch up. And see in the background there, we do see some traffic coming in as well. That is Cody Pride, that's our race leader, having to almost slam the anchors on going through Maggott and Beckett, pulling right up to the back, just wanting to get by, does not want to be held up at all. But I think Cody Pride is they don't do things by halves, do they? We've never seen them back off or be conservative. It's all or nothing with Cody.
I mean, we just saw Pike just giving a little flash of the lights after this. Look at Cody Pride just reeling in, getting onto the back end, not wanting to lose out too much time. Almost a little bit of a bump draft scenario coming down, and space going to be given out from the GT4 to allow Pride to go around the outside. But a flash of the headlights indicating that maybe Pike wasn't too chuffed with the way that move was planned out by Pride. I mean, it didn't look like there was any harm or foul that was done in there. Pride, just like you said, wanting to minimize the amount of lost time being caught up behind a car through Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel, and just kind of sat in the draft for as long as possible. I mean, it can go wrong from there, but it didn't.
No, absolutely, especially when you get into a rhythm as well. We've been running now for 50 minutes plus the 10 minutes left over from the hour, so 25 minutes we have been running. And when you're in the lead, you're basically, you're 15 on the going across the timing sheet there. I was 16.5 seconds ahead of second place. At that point, you're just trying to run consistent and fast laps. And although in Cody's case, I'd imagine it's more like hot lapping at this point. Primarily for fun, I'd imagine. You don't want anything that can throw you out of that rhythm. It's not really a welcome distraction. So I can understand Cody's mindset towards that, and it seems to be that was that Boardman trying to break the slipstream a little bit for Pike heading down the Hamilton straight there, heading towards Abbey. But it does seem like Pike is closing the gap to Boardman just a little bit, so potentially lining up to give this another go.
I mean, Boardman was given a little bit of a bit of a breathing space after the two of them came into contact at Aintree. We commented on a good save from both of them. Boardman finding the grass quite quickly, lucky not to put it into the side barrier after recovering it as well. So, I mean, that attack has been kind of pressing as an issue. It's been coming since the start of the race. We chatted about it. It was something that you picked up early on, Josh, is that Boardman isn't getting the space that he's previously been used to, and Pike has a good read in these conditions. But as things dry up, maybe that plays into the hands of Boardman, and the two of them are certainly getting themselves geared up to have a good rundown to the line together. So I'm glad that we didn't see controversy coming through. I mean, it's always sad to see when cars come together and it puts that entire battle on ice. But Andrew Pike just looking for maybe a little bit more wetness on the track in these on these wet tires. We see it's damp, but we know the rain's been coming down. We know that there's limited grip availability on the wet sets of tires too. So once it does dry up and you get that dry line, you're trying to use as much of the racetrack that still has water on it to utilize those wet tires. Otherwise they're just heating up, they get out of operating temperature, and then it's like driving with slicks on a wet track.
Oh, absolutely. There's a reason why the tyres, the compounds, the treads, they're all suited for different conditions. And from what I understand, the wet tyre set is fairly resilient. Like, you can use it a fair bit as it goes dry, especially if you start taking the wet line and, you avoid the dry line that forms. It's just a case of trying to manage the temperatures and pressures to keep it down. But the tyres will wear fairly quickly. They'll start blistering rather than graining as they get way too hot, and the rubber actually starts to melt slightly. And there does come a point where you don't want to be on them for too long, especially as the weather starts to dry out, and it looks like we are definitely starting to see that. Andrew Pike is just getting a slightly better exit than Bobbin. You see go slightly wide through Copse there, and potentially eyeing up a move into Maggots and Beckett's, but Boardman will be wiser to it. He'll be closing that door before it even opens. And will not be letting Boardman through. And Silverstone Cameras as we have a little bit of a catch up there through Chapel. Again, you just see the gap between the two, and we've seen so many moves be sent into Stowe, and are we going to see that again? In the slipstream, although these cars, as we said, they're not very aerodynamically affected. Going around the outside of Stowe potentially, can they get a better exit towards Vale? Again, we have seen moves like that done as well, so Pike going a little bit wide. That's going to leave it open to Olaf Leffer as well. Olaf Leffer, the blue flag's waved, trying to go through and interfere with this and squeezing between the two, and that's not going to be great for Andrew Pike at all. That's just made a tiny bit more of a gap, but nothing that can't be closed up again, but it's going to move him out of striking distance, keeping the accelerator pinned as he goes wide through onto the Hamilton straight, and he has to do that work.
That was a bit of a heart-dropping moment coming through there. GT3 car coming through, charging, and a little bit of panic coming in from both the GT4s. They weren't quite sure. They're just holding their line, trying to let the GT3s get by and managing their own race here. And once again, we'll see Hellman now being in the same sort of situation, trying to thread the needle, trying to find a way through. I think a good sort of move there from Pike to just kind of ease up, just stay away from what unpredictability would come through from a GT3, trying to get through the traffic, and it's cost him quite big time down the back end of the Wellington straight. But that time that Pike is making up to Boardman is something that you can't just discard here. I mean, it's measurable in terms of seeing that pace coming out, and certainly will be in the back of Boardman's mind. If it's all about managing tire temperatures and tire pressures, you're going to lose your focus on what is going to be the racing line that you need to stick to. You'll start to wonder why the driver behind you is picking up so much grip where you're struggling to get it down, and you start questioning your own theories behind it. So it's certainly an interesting place to be in. Macaulay catching up to the back of Killian Ryan Meenan here, and of course Macaulay having to make his way through the field after that little send around through club in the opening lap. Macaulay having a good recovery drive so far, and it's only really the likes of Ryan, Meenan, Noble and Panka left to deal with. But Gergo Panka leading in class in the Cup cars, which is something that we haven't seen here in the championship so far. So good showing coming out from Gergo Panka, leaving the rest to just kind of scrap it out. Mike Noble not too far off the back end of Panka at this point in the race, you see on the timing sheet. But Killian Ryan Meenan is the battle we're looking at the moment, with the likes of Joe Macaulay to make their way down to Stowe.
Absolutely, and Killian's not going to make life easy for Macaulay as well. And as Macaulay starts making his way up through the field, he's getting all the way up to a lot of the drivers that are a bit scrappier, a bit more difficult to get past. Another thing as well of note is the top three. Leffer has gotten past Heilman as well. I think we saw that earlier with the passes on the GT4s. So somewhere along the line, something's not gone so well for our own Stewie. But still holding on to P3. P3 is still good. But no, you're absolutely correct. Gergo Panka absolutely with the pace today. Macaulay just trying to find a gap big enough to slip that Cup car through, to try and maybe force Killian into a bit of a mistake, just trying to sell a bit of a dummy, having to really late on the brakes there, having to kind of really break up and take avoiding action to the back of Killian. You see Killian with a bit of a slide there as well. These cars are moving around. You saw from the outdoor shots as well, Macaulay's car again, little bits of opposite lock. Killian moving onto the little bit of AstroTurf there, which is very, very risky in the wet. You do not want to risk potentially losing it there. And that GT4 there might also help close the gap a little bit. Is there going to be room left? There is just about. You do not want to get in the way of a battle like this from the car behind. That's not a GT4. That's a no. Sorry, that is a GT4. Sorry,
it is.
From the front there, it kind of looked more like a GT3. But then why would a Cup car be quicker in the corners? That is the question, as there was damage for whatever reason. But I was slightly mistaken there, but the battle is still raging on.
Josh hurts me every time, just saying that all Porsches look the same from the front. It's a fight I've been having with people all my life. But good little scrap coming out between Macaulay and Killian. It's Joe Macaulay and Killian Ryan Meenan certainly have done a lot of driving together, and certainly got the pace to give us a good little show down coming into it. I think a lot of the drivers maybe starting to think about having a pit stop for a tire change. I know the GT4s, a couple of them have been into the pits already, maybe already deciding that it's time to get rid of wets. I mean, it's still wet. I mean, you can't discard the fact that the track conditions are wet. I know it says damp, but it's still raining down, maybe eased up since what we saw at the start. But it's a gamble. You're trying to see if you can undercut the decision that other people are maybe not going to make, and that might. So, Joe Macaulay, too much curb coming out, and we said we'd be gifted a treat. Commentator's curse comes through in the number 18. Too much curb, tire spins, and just going to send them in. We'll get a race replay of that. You'll just see, here's the exit. That's where too much curb was used, and a little bit of the AstroTurf as well. And you mentioned how dangerous it is. You're keeping your foot planted as much as you can, and sometimes it just doesn't pay the dividends that are needed. A big slam as well, so that's going to affect the downforce side. Googler now going to be right on the back end of the likes of Macaulay once again. Andy Boardman and Pike, they've changed their positions, but Andy Boardman trying to have the inside line here. They are going to go side by side as they go through the field. And Pike in that number 57 might just have to surrender that position that he's just been granted coming down the back of Brooklyn. So nice line coming out then from Andy Boardman in that 69. nice and tight and keeps it over the checkered line, which means that he will resume in P1. But this is a defense of all defenses at this point. Pike throwing everything out there, and Andy Boardman just trying to hang on for dear life. Currently leads the championship. I mean, if he lost out this particular race, came second, it wouldn't really affect his championship standings. So I mean, if it is going to be a case of not being able to hold on and lose that position out, it's not going to upset his championship standings. But no driver wants to accept that. You know, you want to win as many races as you can. And side by side down the Hanger Straits, and they come into the right-hander once again. Andrew Pike going to be on the outside of Stowe and set himself up for the inside of Vale. That's a nice move around the outside, Josh. You talked about us seeing it, and we get to see it again.
Absolutely, it's absolutely clean and textbook. You know, you just kind of, in that situation, neither car has the optimal line because Boardman can't take the exit. Therefore, Pike can carry the speed on the curb, on the exit, and just try and carry the exit speed. You're going side by side mid corner. You're sacrificing cornering speed for exit speed, and going down into the next braking zone, that's just time that you make on the car that's on the inside of the corner. So where you don't have the apex, you do kind of more than make up for it on exit. And we're seeing a lot of GT4s coming into the pits all at once there. That's 4 cars. That was Gleeson, Vondra, Redford and Van Aken all in the pits at once there. So I think it's about at the time where we're going to start seeing some of the drivers thinking that maybe the dry tyre is the way forward from this point on in the race. Well, it still looks very wet, so we'll need to keep an eye on the pace of those drivers and see exactly where they fall in the field, and see exactly when those tyres do decide that they're warm enough to maintain the pressure and then turn on.
I mean, without us getting the onboard feeds of what their current tyre pressures are, it's kind of hard to see how these tyres are handling up. But I mean, from the battles that we've seen between Pike and Boardman, certainly seems to be a lot of trying to maximize those wet lines, stay away from the forming up dry line. So it would indicate that they're trying to just cool them down, try and make use of those wets. So my question then comes out to you, Josh. I mean, if it's something that you just don't think is a fair question, then just tell me I must go and play out in the thunderstorm. But you know, does Boardman decide to go in for an earlier pit stop here and kind of force the decision to come out to the number 57 as to what they're going to do in response?
I mean, quite possibly. I mean, the undercut is always an option, but it all comes down to when is the most effective time to actually stop. Obviously, you want to lose as little time as possible, and it's going to be a bit of a strategy call. And obviously, these drivers, they don't have strategists telling them what to do or what the most optimal thing to do is. They kind of have to use their own experience and their own kind of initiative to be able to decide that. And I definitely see an undercut potentially working for Boardman. A little bit of clear air and a little bit of a chance to kind of push as much as they can if those dry tyres, and if they're confident that the dry tyres are the right option. You see Boardman just again looking at a different screen. Gogo Panka currently ahead in the Cup class, and by some margin as well, a good 4 seconds ahead of Mike Noble according to the timing sheet, but maybe caught up a little bit behind Zoe Tang. Panka having an absolutely amazing race so far. Obviously there's some really big names. So obviously in predictions, I think we both expected Noble and Macaulay to be scrapping at the front, but Panka coming out with an absolutely stunning drive, and we see Saridi getting past Stewie there as well. The little Stewie Haleman, obviously we know him as Stewie, and that was a pretty big pass as well, and Stewie going slow. So I wonder if something happened to the bubblegum, the Pink Elephants team 911 there.
I mean, Antonio Saredi starting from the back of the grid, really, considering their drive out here, it's worked out for them. Again, another driver that kind of slipped under the radar of where these predictions would go. We saw the likes of Killian Ryan Meenan in the Cup car to come in. Yeah, now Andy Boardman going to go in. This is kind of what I was alluding to. I mean, if you're a driver, you're looking at the track conditions now. Your wet tires become less effective as the track gets drier. It has eased off in terms of rain density. and the weather prediction showing that we're going to go dry in the next 10 minutes, and then of course 30 minutes it's continuing to stay dry, so no more rain coming through. So if you are struggling now with the wet, it's probably the most ideal time to probably come in and have a bit of a gamble with that, and say, well, you know, the track is drying up, the dry line is something that we can start to use. You know, damp track then goes dry, or greasy first and then dry. So, I mean, it's something that's quite interesting to see. Chicane Ryan being the first and only of the Cup cars so far to have made a pit stop. We can only assume has been a tyre change so far.
No, absolutely, and keeping an eye on the times there as well. The last time that they just set, I mean, my timing sheet just seems to be a little bit broken, because according to my timing sheet, their best lap is a 2:08.061, so we'll keep an update on that pace. I'll keep an eye on that time and see exactly what they get next time round. Obviously let the tyres warm up just a little bit and see if that best lap time is anywhere close to being matched or even beaten. And that will be the benchmark, I think, to see exactly where these dry tyres are sitting with the conditions, and we'll actually be able to maybe even see if Boardman has made the right choice to stop early for the new set of tyres. Obviously, right on the back of Pike, and you know, this is potentially, oh, that's Valentine off as well in the GT4, so maybe just getting it a little bit wrong there. But yeah, the change for the lead of the GT4 has just come down to strategy as well as pace, and if these cars have made the right decision. But I mean, if you look at Nico Kiesma, I mean, Nico Kiesma did a pit stop on lap 6 already in the race, so you can kind of think, yeah, there goes Andrew Piking's bit, but Kiesma did an earlier pit stop than Boardman did. Boardman waiting obviously later, having a big fight out with Pike, then exits the pits and sits 5.5 seconds behind Kiesma. Of course, Kingston Lee then in the GT4s has yet to go in to serve a pit stop, which we're assuming is going to be tire changes. Chicane Ryan Meenan certainly has changed tires in his Cup car, and we're keeping an eye on those track times to see how that affects it. But no one else in those Cup car classes has decided to go in and make this call. So could be big brain moves coming out from the Sidemax Motorworks number 231. And with 32 minutes left on the clock, race conditions evolving and changing, it comes down to not just battling on track for position, but also just making good strategic calls, also putting yourself out maybe into a bit of fresh air, being able to really grind your lap times down and wait for other people to get caught out. Yeah, and speaking of lap times on dry tyres, Cillian Raiminen setting a 2:10.869, so about 2 seconds, almost 3 seconds behind their personal best in the race so far. So maybe the tyres are still warming up, but it seems to be there is grip on the dry tyres. And with Pike having pitted for the tyres as well, coming out ahead of Boardman, maybe that undercut didn't quite work out as well as they would have liked. Oh wait, no, actually it's updating. Sorry, the timesheet is in fact updating. Pike, so the undercut definitely did help Boardman. So by a margin as well, 1.391 seconds. So we are going to potentially see this battle restarting all over again. Olaf Leffer on the back of Andrew Pike, just sending it down the inside of Vale, just about leaving enough space. And yeah, you just see the difference in pace between the GT4s and the GT3s. GT3s looking a lot more aggressive with the more advanced aero that's actually on the car. So Benjamin Hellman deciding to take the pit as well. It seems to be the dry tyres seem to be, maybe the wet tyres are just wearing down. Maybe they're just the drivers are feeling that this isn't the tyre to be on, and despite the conditions currently, it's still damp, but the dries might still be enough to cut it.
So I mean, Hellman will then be the first of the GT3s into the pits to potentially make a tyre change. Nobody else yet deciding that their GT3 car didn't have the grip levels out there. Pride, of course, still just doing a monstrous P1 lead at the moment ahead of Olaf Leffer in that 308, who sits in a provisional second place. This was kind of like what we saw coming out at Suzuka from Cody Pride, just monster pace coming down, making the most of the power unit that is available there, trying to, I suppose, negate needing to go into the pits again. That was the biggest costing factor out at Suzuka. Virgo Panka leads out in the Cup cars, also yet to go into the pits, and we've only seen Brady Killian making a pit stop for making that tire change. So Virgo Panka doing a good job here. Slipped under our radar when it came to picking potential race winners in their various classes, and sort of punishing us for that. I mean, 9.8 seconds ahead of Noble at this point. So certainly got the run coming down, and a great run so far.
I'll say 9.9 seconds ahead of Noble. That's not something you hear every day, is it, George?
No, definitely not something you hear every day. And we see John Fisher into the pits, Mike Noble into the pits as well. So maybe those tire changes are still coming. We see the track now going greasy. Rain has stopped coming down. It certainly does affect the effectiveness of those wet tires when the track does dry up. It doesn't take a long time for the drainage portions of these tracks to come into effect. And as the cars continue to lap around, especially a big field like this, those dry lines form up really quickly, get rid of the standing water. So, I mean, for a lot of the drivers here, I think the GT4s kind of called it very early on that they would be, better off going on to the slicks and getting rid of their wet sets of tires. And I mean, for Kingston Lee, that's certainly going to be interesting to see. He sits in P12 overall, but that's obviously the leader in the GT4s. Charisma, who also went in early for a pit stop, sits in P2, and then this man, Andy Boardman, sits in P3. He is only just 1 second behind the likes of Charisma. And just based on raw pace alone, you would sort of think that there would be the ability to catch and make that overtake. Kingston Lee going to go into the pits, so that's going to then hand over the lead back to Charisma, and Boardman right on the back end. Pike 4.6 seconds down the road, so after making that tire change for the number 57, hasn't really worked out the same way it has for the other drivers. So it does take a little bit of adaptation when you are making these kind of changes out there. Can't just slap on a new set of tires and suddenly have a whole new race to approach. You've kind of been easing into it, getting used to what you were doing on the previous set of tires, whether it was just managing the throttle inputs or whatnot, and now you've got something else to consider. You've got to get those tires back up to temperature. You're trying to stick to the dry line versus making use of the very wet parts of the circuit whilst it was drying. So it's going to be interesting to see if Pike can just close down that gap again, because it would be a shame to see Pike and Boardman not have another scrap out right at the very end of this race.
Oh, absolutely, and it just seems to be the strategy, it does play a massive part in, obviously it plays a massive part, especially when you have changeable conditions such as this, and that's Boardman being actually not held up by, but trying to find a way around Nico Kuzma, who's actually, we're saying for Kuzma has pit. Kuzma is also on dry tires, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I assume so. I mean, pitted very early, went in on lap 6 to make a tire change, and then after that, went in on lap 6. No idea if they did make a tire change.
So yeah, it's just been noted to us in our chat now. Handed a bit of a note. It's a Kuzma pitted due to damage. If we are, obviously we can only speculate. But that would mean that Kuzma will still be on the wet tyres and yet to stop for dry. So Boardman making pretty short work, and I guess we'll see the times with how quickly Boardman does pull away from Kuzma. And well, to be fair, I don't think that's really, given the sort of pace that we've seen from Boardman, especially today as well, today and last week, he's completely on it. So I'd imagine they would run away with that a little bit, especially if Kuzma is on the wet tyres.
I mean, Kuzma's pit time was about 4 seconds slower than the likes of Boardman, and for a lot of the drivers that have pitted later, it would be quite a short pit stop considering if he did put the tyres on. So I think the theory craft working out maybe the right way there and kind of calling it out. But for Boardman. This is, I mean, strategy has worked out. Pike is a long way down the field, 5.7 seconds behind Keizma, who is 7/10 behind Boardman. So I think for Andy Boardman, a good read to go in for that undercut strat potentially.
Absolutely. I mean, you called it, George. You know, you pitched the question: is the undercut worth it? And he was, you know, and Andy was obviously very certain in the tires. Maybe feeling the drop off, and maybe just, you know, assuming that, you know, that the tires were the correct call, and that's absolutely the case. See Stefan Van Aken, right, diving out to the inside of Brooklands, taking a bit of a look, trying to take a bit of a look on the inside of Zoe Tang there in the very identifiable pink Cayman, the 171. So he's coming out of left field now. Who's going to get the better exit? It seems to be going into the final turn, going side by side, and that's going to be enough for Van Aken, I think, to just about make the move stick. But going side by side into T1, Zoe will fall back and just kind of hold back a little bit. But going for the inside again into T1, contact, pushing Van Aken into the infield, but a long way ahead.
Van Aken having gone into the pits to serve out that 15-second time penalty that they got for what happened at Vale in the opening lap, the big kickflip that we haven't seen in a long time in ACC, and having to make their way through the field. I don't think expected Zoe to try and cut back through into the inside line there under braking into the opening right-hander, but the little contact coming between them, I think Zoe Tang just easing off the accelerator there as well, just kind of feeling that there was a bit of responsibility for making that move up there and just kind of giving that position back. So I think if the stewards do look into that, they might look at that and say, well, it was almost not self-serving, but Zoe going to give that position back. Thomas Baranowski trying to close down onto the back of Pike. So for Pike, I mean, this race has become quite a struggle, considering was sort of fighting it up for P1 at one stage. With Thomas Baranowski closing in, that's going to make things a little bit more difficult to try and make progress through. Once you've got another car on your tail, can't really focus on what you want to do in front. So going to be an interesting sort of position to be in. Mike Noble has closed down that gap to Gogo Panka. It was a big gap before, 9 seconds it was. It now sits at 1.1 second. Make that 0.3 seconds, 3/10 now, the 1, 2, 3. Coming right into the slipstream then of Gogo Panka. The two FFS racing cars going to go side by side into the braking zone for Brooklands. Mike Noble later on the brakes manages to get that cup car round. Beautiful pass coming in from Mike Noble then to snatch the lead in the cup car class. The 1, 2, 3 will get ahead there. So brilliant bit of driving from Mike Noble. And I think Gogo Panka spotting that out, just seeing that the slipstream and the exit out of Aintree was going the way of the 1, 2, 3, and tried to hold on for as long as possible, forcing Mike to go up on the inside of Brooklands and hope that he couldn't get the car turned around in time. But a beautiful apex coming through and allowing that move to be done.
Absolutely amazing driving from both drivers as well. You know, Panka leaving just enough space that he's required to leave for Noble, not making life easy for Noble at all. I mean, Brooklands is not an easy corner at the best of times, let alone trying to send it on the inside, although it is a corner that it can be done evidently, but just about making it work. And how we going to, it's the 420 of Van Aken being lapped as traffic. But there's something I kind of want to mention to you as well, George. We've seen a lot of cars go wide, especially into T1. And how long do you think it's going to be until we see, or if we see, any track limits violations?
Don't put that bad juju onto me at this stage of the race, Josh. Because right now when I say, oh yeah, we haven't seen any drive-throughs getting awarded, that's when they start to rain down harder than what we saw at the start of this race. And I mean, for a lot of these drivers, there's been a couple of track limits that might have been exploited. The exit on Club down the Hamilton Straits. Certainly one of the places that we've seen a couple of drivers also just extending those allowable track limits. Keep it on the grey stuff, but obviously the main grey stuff, not the outskirts of it. So far, so good. Touch wood. No drive-through penalties for track limits.
Absolutely, and you don't want to see anything that kind of interrupts any of the battles that we've seen, and we've seen some pretty good ones so far. Obviously, Olaf Leffer, and Olaf Leffer's another driver who's just kind of got on with it today. Just kind of, started a few cars back, but worked their way through and just kept their head down. And sometimes that is the sort of race that you can hope for, and just be, hope the traffic doesn't get too far in your way. Hope that you don't get yourself into too much trouble, and just keep your nose clean and keep things nice and consistent. And that's exactly what they've done, and Leffer's been very good at that all season long. He's been so consistent in the races that he's been in, and it's been quite an interesting one to watch and see throughout the season so far.
Oh, it's been a great showing so far in terms of the conditions. I've really loved the dynamic weather effect that we've had for this from this race. We saw practice a bit wet to begin with. We saw it go dry. Towards the end of it, we saw quali just completely pour down, sort of indicating that we might get a wet start. We did, and those conditions then trying up. Oh, Cody Pride turning that Porsche into another lawnmower and just skipping out the entire section of Maggots, Beckett's, and Chapel, just deciding, what, this track is better without it. Oh, he caught it. Another tank slapper, isn't it, Josh? We've seen it punish a couple of drivers. He managed to catch it and just make use of the re-entry road, as I like to call it.
Absolutely, it kind of brings up to like 2 points that I kind of wanted to make, and one I made earlier. Cody Pride doesn't seem to do things by halves, so it's kind of all or nothing. We saw them in Suzuka making a mistake, while so far in the lead, and I was questioning whether or not we'd see a repeat of that today, and it seems to be we have a little bit. But secondly, I don't think Cody Pride has stopped for dries yet, so maybe struggling for grip just a little bit.
Josh, I don't know if you heard earlier, I said that we could blame Mike Jones and he wouldn't be here to shout at me, but he actually bashed the door in and sort of poked his head into the comms box.
The comms box has been raided, people.
It has. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he's going to come and shout at us live on air, but hashtag blame Mike Jones in chats.
It's just the ominous presence.
It makes me very nervous, when the boss man pokes his head in through the door. It's kind of wonder.
Corner eating my chicken nuggets, monitoring you, George.
So there we've got it. Mike Jones is just enjoying his chicken nuggets and monitoring us. So I've got to be careful about what I say. I'm on the watch list now. The
I was
FBI
just about to say that. I was just about to say you're on Mike's special watch list, George. You see, you've hashtag blame Mike Jones a little too much in the past couple of weeks, and that's what you get.
Hey, oi! Don't let him know that I've dropped that a couple of times. He hasn't heard all of them. He only came to shout at us now. So to be honest, I could have got away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids.
It looks like we're seeing a replay here. That's Pike on Charisma. Just getting the overtake done so far. Just cutting on the inside of Aintree, and that was fairly clean. And that's the sort of move that you want. It seems to be like Charisma is starting to struggle for pace just a little bit. Obviously, they did make the early stop, as we discussed earlier, and that could be an influencing factor so far. Boardman still a fair while up the road, though, and I say that 1.743 seconds. So
I think Boardman must have made a bit of a mistake then, because there was a lot of time for Pike to make up. Charisma, if we theory craft it out, isn't on the ideal set of tires compared to these other two drivers, but Pike, who looked like they were struggling to adapt to those conditions, has certainly eaten into that big lead, which I didn't catch it all. I'm not sure if the 57 the 69 of Boardman had made a mistake coming into that, but with 1.7 seconds between them, certainly going to change the way that this race ends if 16 minutes is an indicator to go by.
No, absolutely, and there's a lot of factors that can influence it as well. Obviously, there's traffic, there's just overall pace. Maybe Boardman just got a little bit comfortable as well. Maybe more Boardman just got a little bit comfortable, just started to lose a little bit of pace, and maybe Andrew is also picking it up as well. We saw the difference in pace You know, we saw the difference in pace between the two earlier, and Pike definitely does have the legs today. Still 15 minutes of the race left to go, so I wouldn't rule out the chance for a last-minute scrap as well. So that'd be really good to see if these guys can make it happen. Well, I suppose if it's Andrew Pike can make it happen.
I mean, the raw pace that we saw Pike bring into things when they sort of started this race out held onto the back of Boardman from the get-go, and certainly interesting to see if that's going to pan out. And looking into the Cup Car class, it's much the same. Panker and the likes of Mike Noble have also just made this really interesting towards the closing phase. So Mike Noble closed down a massive gap. We saw that come down. But then Panker's just been hanging on to the back end of that Cup car. So battles in the fields that we probably didn't expect to see, all the big battles coming down. Cup cars, I suppose, always delivering on the action side, regardless of who's driving up the front of them. But the GT4 is getting a little bit of interest towards the front of their respective class this time around.
Absolutely, it's always good to see the GT4 is getting a little bit more love as well. Obviously, you get a bit more screen time as well, because I know, you know, we try to spread things out as evenly as we can. You know, we're trying to keep you guys as to where we can see the action going on. We're only a couple of sets of eyes, you know, at the end of the day, and you know, it's really good to see the GT4s getting just a little bit more love. Cup car class, again, this has just been another one of those races where all of the racing has been with these, well, not all of it, but a fair chunk of the racing has been with them as well. And you're absolutely correct, Panker on the back of Mike Noble, and you know, after losing the lead after such a long period of time for this race, and Andrew Pike going a little bit wide on exit on entry there, and just breaking the racing line a little bit, losing a tiny bit of time, but already on the back of Bobman. I'm starting to question whether or not Bobman's actually struggling with the car somewhat, if they've got damage or something is holding that 69 Cayman back, because, or if it is just Andrew Pike's raw pace as well. I mean, they've definitely had it so far today.
The pace here that Andrew Pike is delivering is certainly starting to get my goosebumps going. A good on-track battle is always something that I sign up for, especially 13 minutes left to go. RCI TV over here on YouTube, Racing Club International, in partnership with Race Departments, AKM Thematica, Race Face, Speed Labs, and Sim Racing GP. Bring you all the action for this Porsche Masters Cup Round 5 at Silverstone. It started off wet, it's gone dry, and we couldn't have asked the weatherman to be any more accurate. I shouted him on my Twitter. I said that he's never right about things, and of course, when I tweet that out, then he'll be right about something. But my name is George Smith in the box with Joshua Devonshire on the microphone. Of course, all the camera work being done out by our very own Ryan Rai Gill. He's a man of many talents, and this time around just helping out with the broadcast side and bringing us these beautiful shots from around Silverstone. We welcome you all to the chat. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate all the likes and shares that you've given out, all the positive comments in the chat box as well. Guys are superstars for joining us out here, and the race is not done. 12 minutes to go.
Absolutely, and still plenty of time, as you say, and again, just right on the back of each other, and it's absolutely, it's crazy just how long these guys have been going on for. I mean, it's been an hour and 50 minutes. Andrew Pike taking a look along the inside, heading towards Stowe. Can he make? We saw a very similar move earlier on, but looks like Bobman's going to be a bit more, a bit more wise to it. He's got to cover that line, you know, that Pike took, but going down potentially the outside of Vale now. Lit on the brake seems to be that they're going side by side into the chicane, and that gives Pike the inside pushed onto the grass just a little bit, looking like they've made the move stick, but it seems to be that Bobbin will get the better exit. So can he keep the run down into Abbey? I don't think he can. It looks like Pike has made that move stick, and that will be the change of position that we're looking for the GT4s. And that I got to say, George, that happened a lot sooner than I expected.
It did. They were meant to wait until the final countdown had begun, and then we were going to see it out. But Pike taking a lot of the inside curve into the right-hander. Not going to be enough to upset him to allow this number 69 of Boardman to strike back. but certainly a good bit of driving coming out from Andrew Pike. We kind of said that the undercut would go the way of Boardman, and it did. And then Pike, having made up a lot of ground to get that position back overall. So stunning drive coming out from the OTL Racing number 57. Big applause all around. The 10 minutes to go on at the clock. It's not done and dusted just yet. Got to see the checkered flag from this position, and going to be on the defense and try and put a little bit of time between themselves, the number 57 and the 69. For Andrew Pike, doesn't want to have to deal with defensive driving at this stage of the race. Boardman going to be looking for opportunities, but the pace coming out from Andrew Pike just been incredible.
Oh, absolutely. He kind of came right out the gate today, and I don't think he's lost the opportunity to take this championship, and he's certainly fighting like that is certainly the case, and obviously every point counts, and you got to think of the long haul. You got to think about the final, you got to think about the final result at the end of the season, not just at the end of every race. It all adds up. It's like building blocks, it takes a lot of little bricks to build a house, and building it, the championship is all about who can build a bigger house. So, Pike putting himself right on the right foot, and it seems to be Baranowski is charging right up to the back of Nico Kwisma. Nico Kwisma losing positions quite a bit, just dropping off in pace just a tiny bit, and leaving themselves open to the cars behind. And so we can't see the gap between Kingston and Lee right now on the timing sheet until it updates. But, doing a good job of keeping Baranowski behind. That's obviously just preservation at this point, and try to hold on to P3, to the bottom step of the podium for the GT4s.
I mean, the fact that all of our drivers have gone into the pits means that the weather has successfully worked out, means that everybody's had to go in and serve a pit stop of some sorts. Wonder if there's any fuel to be added by anyone out there, maybe some people running a little bit lighter knowing they would go into the pit box. I suppose trying to make a shorter pit stop would always be key out here rather than running with a wetter car. Bit of fuel in wet conditions in the Porsches as well, considering where the fuel tank is, also does add to their stability, so maybe running a little bit higher, not going to be the worst thing out there. So I'd be interested to see in the chat box when the race is done. I think that's always my favorite place to go and sort of hang out once we are done with the race, go and see what strategies different people ran and see what their reasons for it were. But certainly been an interesting race so far. Baranowski on the back end of Kwisma, I can see him in the sights, 1/10 between them. The last update will update again coming down over the line. It's dropped down to 5/10, so losing a bit of time is Thomas Baranowski into the third sector. But knowing that you can close that gap down is going to be a big mindset thing, knowing, well, 7 minutes on the clock, I've done it before, I can do it again, and I can get myself up into a third place in a podium paying position in my class.
Absolutely, this becomes a battle of attrition as well. It's not only is Baranowski now fighting with Kwisma. We've been going for so long now. We've been going for over an hour and then some. An hour and seven and a half minutes. We're so close to the end now that the battle of attrition really comes into. You fight your own mind, you fight your own consistency. You're trying to keep consistency and speed up at the same time, and that's not an easy task. See Googly catching up to the back of Killian Ryan Meenan. And, we've seen some scraps between these guys as well throughout the race, and I do wonder if, with the final 7 minutes remaining, we're going to see another last-minute scrap for, again, what is the final spot on the podium for the Cup Car class.
I mean, in terms of raw lap pace, the best lap that Google has done is a little bit quicker than Killian Ryan Meenan, but in terms of their last lap's done, it's really not much in it between the two. It's all coming down to the line, though, as they make their way now into Vale. It's all about just seeing what that back end of the car in front of you is doing. If you see it start to oversteer, you see it start to go into a bit of a drift, you know that they're losing time out on the circuit, and these bouncy Cup cars can certainly have a weird way about losing time, so just got to keep an eye out on that, just see where the bravery comes in. A lot of brakes being used up there by Killian as he makes his way to the end of the Hamilton Straits, and that's going to slow Googler down as well. Not quite a place that he had really been able to maximize the run that he had coming down. but then in through the loop. On the back end, once again, Google are going to sit in that slipstream. You know, the Cup cars do have a good slipstream effect. They've got some aero, and going to be having a look maybe down into the braking zone, but Chicane going to go defensive, go for that inside line, force Google to go round wide, but Google thinking better of it, trying to maximize the amount of momentum he can carry through this sector of the track. And it's not going to be enough to make a move at this point, but certainly a good battle brewing up here.
Oh, absolutely, Chicane just absolutely preemptively blocking that inside. That's the difference between very, very, very heavy on the brakes there, and almost running into the back of Chicane. And you have to have a lot of trust between these two drivers. Now, Chicane obviously being able to read the inside like a book. It's a move we've seen so many times over. And Google right on the back of Chicane there as well. And you said it yourself, I am starting to wonder whether or not Chicane is running a setup that's more suited to the wet conditions, in the hope that maybe running a softer car would actually pay dividends during the race, with the drop off at the end. But maybe maybe if that is a strategy, maybe it didn't work going side by side, just squeezing Googlia into the ground just a little bit.
Sandstrom slams the door and saying, no, get out of here, you're not making a move on the inside there. But I think that's a good point, Josh. Maybe not really having a hybrid setup that's suited for the wet and dry, coming in here thinking, well, maybe it's going to rain a little bit longer than it really was, and then getting caught now with the dry conditions. So certainly a good point that you've raised there.
Absolutely. And no, that was not just a little bit of a correction there. That wasn't Sundstrom slamming the door. That was Chicane slamming the door. Also of to note, stop go 30 for speeding in the pits for number 35. That is Baranowski, who was chasing down Kuzma, but now finding themselves in P16 behind Kingstonley. Side by side though with Googlia and Chicane, absolute masterclass in defending so far. Are they going to cover the inside again? Doesn't seem like that's the case. Googlia will take a look, but there's just not quite enough space and time to get that move done. But potentially looking at a move on the outside of Luffield, it seems to be that Googlia's Porsche is definitely able to carry more momentum in the corners than the 231 of Chicane, of the Ryan Meaning car. So it seems to be that Googlia does have the quicker car currently. It's just a case of finding a gap big enough to get round.
Thanks for the correction out there. I completely got myself muddled up there with Chicane and Alexander out on the circuit. It was Mike Jones's fault. # blame Mike Jones, throwing chicken nuggets at me from the door. But I mean, certainly a masterclass of driving coming out from these two drivers. And Chicane just saying ultra defensive, forcing Alexander to try and find a very difficult way around, not going to give up the easy lines. And once again, down the Hangar Straits, they are going to go into the same position. Chicane deciding that he likes that inside line, forcing Alexander Googlia to try and go around the outside. But look at that extension coming out from GT4 is in the way, almost making a very, very big bang boom out as they come into the likes of Chicane, a little bit of a mistake, kicks up some of the grass coming on the exit of Vale. And here we go, we get a little look-see at it. We just missed that dicey move coming through, but here we go. This is where Chicane kind of gets a little bit of the grass. It's actually Alexander Googlia that gets a bit squibbly in the background. Chicane drives away from it. So these two pushing it tooth and nail, trying to fight for a position. Googlia gets a bit oversteery again. A little tap maybe coming in from behind at some point. A bump draft attempt as they make their way out through Aintree. But Googlia will be wanting to try and make the move on the inside. Chicane immediately taking to that portion of the track, staying in the middle and setting himself up to defend this inside line into Brooklands. Just making that Cup car so difficult to pass.
Absolutely, Chicane not making it easy for Googlia at all, not making life, making life a little bit difficult, as he's within the rights to do, fighting for a podium at the end. Actually, fighting for a podium and the third place in the class. So, less than a minute left to go. And this is coming down to the wire just a little bit, and yeah, you see it again. You see Googlia. You know, you see the speed that they can carry into the corners. It seems to be that the mid-corner speed, the entry to mid-corner speed seems to just be so much quicker than Killian's, but Chicane just not giving the space for Googlia to get by, but looking side by side, going just almost I was a contact, I think, was made a little bit there. Chicane just getting a little bit squirrely, and you know, using every little bit of space. And can we see a move on the outside of store yet again for so many times this race, running so far wide on the inside? You know, Chicane will get elbows out just a little bit. Seems that Googlia will have the inside going into the veil, but not quite enough to make it stick. Now Chicane has the inside. Chicane will have the inside for the next turn as well, getting onto the grass, losing a tiny bit of time. The timer has just ticked down to 0. Googlia running wide as well, but has made the move stick on Chicane and just finding barely enough space to put that cup car through.
I mean, what a defense coming out there from Chicane. I mean, Alexander had a great run, but the two of them giving each other the respect out on the circuit. We'll cross over to Cody Pride, who will take home the victory in the GT3. Number 15 with a very dominant performance there, making sure to get the move done and dusted. Looking back at Chicane and Alexander, it looks like the drag down to the straight will still continue between them. Mike Noble taking home the P1 in class for the Cup cars. Gogo Panka getting the second spot, and this is the battle to see who cheers from the third step of the podium as they come into the final corner.
Absolutely, and I don't think it's going to be quite enough to make anything happen. It seems that last lap overtake for Googlia has just secured them P3. A little bit of oversteer from Chicane actually on the final, going through Luffield there. So, you know, maybe was struggling with the car just a tiny amount. Andrew Pike will take first position for the GT4s. You know, absolutely amazing drive, you know, kind of coming back from the strategy call from the pit stops. You know, I genuinely did think that Boardman was a little bit ahead. Mike Noble finishing the race and parked on the side of the road in true Mike Noble fashion. We've seen him finish and throw the car to one side. Cody Pride doing donuts, you know, the wind sticking, and I believe with Fouchard coming in fourth, that would give Cody Pride enough points to potentially take the lead of this championship.
Oh, big celebrations coming out from Cody Pride. All of the Pride fans in the chat going wild as well. A big drive coming out from Gogo Panka to take home that P2 in the Cup cars. I mean, it was a battle well fought out. Had a big lead at one point in the race as well. Noble closing down, managing to secure that win, but a solid performance coming out from all the drivers out on the circuit today. And I mean, those conditions didn't disappoint, did they, Josh?
No, absolutely not. No, and Cody Pride absolutely commanding drive from start to finish pretty much. I mean, one off track, but you know, in getting the win, also managed to open a lawn mowing business at the same time. So it wasn't going off track, it was entirely planned, it was deliberate, you know, just stopping by, you know, to get business advice and, you know, making a bit of money on the side as well. You know, Silverstone does need the grass maintaining.
So there we get a little look at the standings overall, and I like the fact that we turned the Porsches into lawnmowers again a couple of times there. Certainly an expensive lawnmower, an expensive expedition. Mike Noble as well at the end of his race, deciding that his pit crew hadn't done enough work changing the tires out. He's going to send the car into the repair shop before the next round. But from us here at Racing Club International, that draws to a close of what has been a very eventful Porsche Masters Cup Round 5 at Silverstone. I loved the weather. I loved the racing. I think it was a fantastic turnout from the GT4s. Did a good job out there with the conditions, considering a lot of the traffic coming past them had to be dealt with. But next week, we head off to the final round. Next week, Monday, out at Spa. That will determine the championship for a lot of the drivers here. And I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's up at the top or in the midfield of those championships. There are points to be made up in all divisions, and certainly very close ones at that. So with that, thank you so much for joining us here on Racing Club International, or RCI TV on YouTube. It's been great to be with you. And of course, Racing Club International, in partnership with Race Department, AK Informatica, Raceface Speed Labs, and Sim Racing GP, wishes you the best of your evening or day, wherever you're joining from. And we will see you again very, very soon. Thank you and good night.